Valerie, welcome back to the last Terrace Talk of the season. The Championship is almost over. I think a season that both Norwich and Cardiff will be delighted to see the back of for different reasons. Lots riding on the final game for plenty of other Championship teams, and been a competitive league over the course of the season, but certainly not going to be I think probably a dead rubber is fair to say at Carrow Road on Saturday. With that, of course, delighted to welcome Simon Field back to the channel to talk all things Cardiff ahead of this one. Simon, great to have you back on the channel. Shame it wasn't in slightly happier circumstances. Cardiff's relegation, of course, confirmed last week. 22 years since you were last in the third division of English football. On your 125th anniversary, as you told me before we started the show, what's the fan feeling? I suppose probably massive disappointment, but slowly sleepwalking into that situation over recent years, maybe.
Yeah, when a team ends up being relegated, as you said, for the first time in the third tier for about 22 years, there's all sorts of things come out, and you tend to hear a lot more from fans when things are going badly. Everyone comes out to say, I've been saying it for so long, you should have done this and that. But certainly, if you look back on the most of the last few seasons, apart from last season, actually, when we finished in 12th position, things have been not looking good. There's been talk about managers not being allowed to bring in players that they want. And managers would say, as a number of managers do, when it comes to transfer windows, it's important we get our players in early, and the plans are great. And then when the transfer window happens, it's all like, actually, we can't get the players in early. Financial fair play is about to kick in, and now we can't. And so we've had to throw away the list, and then we end up scrambling to get players in towards the end of the transfer window. So we've had that happen a few times. I mean, strangely, one of the ways in which maybe being relegated could help us next season is that the financial fair play rules in Leagues 1 and 2 are completely different to the Championship. And although they're being tightened this coming season because Birmingham and Wrexham have been seen to have bought their way to promotion from League 1 this season, it still means that there is more scope for a wealthy owner. And if Vincent Tan hangs around, then he does have resources to plough more money into a club in an easier way than is allowed in the Championship and the Premier League. So that's possibly one of the few sort of silver linings that we've got. But yes, you can see the thing is with Vincent Tan. I mean, Cardiff fans, most of them are really grateful to him because he basically saved the club from going into administration. When he turned up, we were about to go into administration, so he saved them for that, and his money keeps us going. I mean, I think I read a couple of weeks ago that we've got the 7th highest wage bill of any club in the Championship, so he is keeping us going. But the downside, as far as Vincent Tan is concerned for the fans, is that he's very autocratic, and as much as no decision can be made without his agreement, so the manager has to be somebody that he feels comfortable with. He's quite a spiritual person, and when I say that, if you listen to him speaking, he frequently talks about God willing, and he has this strong faith, and so he has to have a manager that he feels is that he can work with and is comfortable with him on that sort of level. And we haven't had under his reign a sporting director or a football director. And there's a big feeling that the people who run the club have got no footballing knowledge. They're business people. And that's what Cardiff are sadly lacking, is somebody in the hierarchy with football knowledge and experience.
Yeah, you talk about that there. I suppose that maybe bleeds into the fact you've had 8 managers over, I think, the last 4 years. This year, 3 different managers in the dugout. The recruitment has probably been poor at different points. So I suppose how much blame or sort of, I suppose you have to put at Tan's door for those elements. I suppose that sort of bleeds into the conversation you were talking about there, maybe needing some more football people within the football club.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, I can see the benefit in giving people a chance, newcomers a chance. But if you look at a number of the managers, they've been people promoted from within, like who've been running the under-21s. Errol Bullitt was seen, who I believe was, when he came to us last season, was the first championship manager from Turkey. So he was seen as a bit of a gamble, but he had a reasonable pedigree as a manager. And last season, he actually took us to our best finish for a number of years. He took us to 12th position. So he was rewarded with an extended contract. And then, for whatever reason, we had a disastrous start to the season. We had, after 6 games, we were languishing at the bottom of the league with 1 point. We had 1 draw and 5 defeats. And of course, when that starts to happen, you get all this internal sort of strife and whispers in the club and saying, oh, well, he's losing the dressing room, and, he's not playing, he's upsetting players, he's not playing players where they should be playing. And of course, it all starts to unravel. And then what happened then is, so he was sacked, and they appointed Omaritza, who'd come from Watford in the summer as a first team coach. But of course, he'd had no permanent managerial experience. And some people are saying, well, here we go again. We're appointing somebody, who's had no real managerial experience. We've had Errol Bullets. We had Sabri Lamouchi for a while, and he saved us a couple of years ago. He kept us in the division. But then the talk was he and Vincent Tan didn't feel comfortable with him. I think the term that was used was there was no chemistry between them. So whereas a number of people were thinking, well, Lamouchi's got a managerial pedigree, and he saved us, he kept us in the division. What can he do next season? It was because Vincent Tan felt no chemistry with him. There was no room for him to be there. So we had to make another change. So, for Vincent Tan is a bit of a divisive figure, in as much as we are very grateful to him. And he insists, he is still a supporter, even though he hasn't visited the club at all this season. But he is very autocratic, in as much as, he doesn't seem to be very good at delegating. He always has to make the final decision.
So they're sacked a couple of weeks back now, and Aaron Ramsey put in temporary charge for the 3 games. Obviously, tough gig to try and keep you from survival at that point. But is there a feeling maybe that decision came a little bit too late? Could you have maybe made that change a little bit earlier?
Well, the thing, yes. And I mean, there had been talk going back sort of 5-6 weeks, maybe a couple of months, that there was this plan to get to parachute Neil Warnock back in again, our former manager, who took us up to the Premier League, to parachute him back in, to gel the team, just to get some fight back into them, and because he has shown before that he can keep teams up. But the word that came out was that it was, in the end of the day, it was Vincent Tan who decided not to. Again, part of it is because of his culture. He's very big on not losing face. And whether he saw it as it would be an admission of failure, maybe, that he sacked the person that he agreed, that he took on. So yes, I think what finally happened was, as results have not been going our way in the most recent weeks, a lot of pressure was piling on Omaritza, and he said 1 or 2 unfortunate things, like the fans want this, and he said we've got a lot of clueless, not a lot, but we got some clueless fans who don't know what they're talking about, and of course that gets picked up by the media then. It says, oh, manager slams clueless fans, and so the feeling was, I think, going into the last few games, if you're going to have any chance of surviving, you've all got to be together, management, team, fans, all acting together. You've got to generate good atmosphere in the stadium. And the feeling was that with 3 games to go, 2 of which were at home, the fans had sort of split, or a substantial section of the fans had split from Omaritza, and so they weren't going to turn up and support the team. So I agreed with somebody who said it was a desperate last throw of the dice to bring in Aaron Ramsey, because we know, he's obviously a great player and a big Cardiff City fan. He's always said that, he's a fan as much as anything else. So it was a desperate last throw of the dice. He knew, or the club would know that the fans would turn up to support Aaron Ramsey, where a number of them wouldn't have turned up to support Omarita. So yes, it was a desperate last throw of the dice. It hasn't paid off. Performances haven't been bad. But the problem is, I mean, if you look at the table as a whole, we've won the fewest number of games of any team in the Championship. We've only won 9 games. Now, we've drawn quite a large number. And in fact, we haven't lost that. We haven't lost as many as a number of the teams around us. But we've just drawn far too many and we haven't won enough. And I mean, if you look at the last 6 games, where you come to the key part of the season, all the other teams around us have won at least 2. And some of them have drawn a couple as well. So that gives you 8 points straight away. We've only lost 2 of the last 6, but we've drawn the other 4. So drawing these days is just takes you down from it. So Aaron Ramsey, the 2 games that I've seen with him in charge, we've done, we played pretty well. We have had this thing, and I mean, all fans will talk about it. Oh, we haven't had the luck. And we have, I know over a season it evens itself up, but 2 key games that we had to win against relegation rivals were Luton at home and Stoke at home, and we lost them both. And the Stoke game, we lost to an 85th minute goal, which was a blatant handball in the area. And then, the shot was brilliantly saved by our keeper stretching out, but it ricocheted off our defender, bounced back on the line. So it's like things like that happen. And they certainly haven't gone our way at the end of the season. But, overall, the table doesn't lie. We haven't won enough games. And that's why we're likely to finish bottom of the league. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah, I suppose with all that, maybe lack of stability we've spoken around there in the early parts of this show, is there a feeling that when Cardiff do, go down to League One next season, that they can bounce back at the first attempt? Obviously, the big wage bill, maybe looking for a new manager. There's obviously a lot together this summer.
Yeah, well, Vincent Tan, the owner, did issue a statement yesterday in which he said he was, he didn't accept the fact that people said he didn't care, that he watches every game in Malaysia and he kicks every ball. And he said there's a top-down inquiry and investigation going on as to how this happened and how you can stop happening again. And in that, he said a new management team will be appointed in the next, I think he said 2 to 3 weeks. That was the implication. Now, Aaron Ramsey, of course, has been asked about if he wants it, but Aaron Ramsey's position at the moment is that he wants to continue as a player. I mean, he's had a terrible season in terms of injuries yet again. But maybe because there's optimism that Wales may qualify for the World Cup next season, he is focused, he says, fully on, regaining fitness to be a player next season. Now, his contract with Cardiff is up at the end of the season, although there is talk of an option. But I mean, he is getting paid, depending on who you listen to, at least 40,000 a week at the moment. And it's like, well, every club that gets relegated is going to take a massive financial hit. And how would you justify paying somebody 40,000 a week who can only play a few games? And so all that is very much up in the air. But of course, who would have thought that the season would have ended with 2 former Arsenal players as in charge of our 2 clubs, you with Jack Wilshere and us with Aaron Ramsey? I mean, that would have been a massive bet if anybody could have gone for that at the start of the season.
Yeah, they both feel young enough to still be playing. I think, if you look at their age profiles and playing together at Arsenal, that's definitely going to be the story, I think, around this game on Saturday. Just talking back to Cardiff, is there any sort of players that come out of this season with any credit in the bank who have maybe, sort of stepped up and performed and delivered? Because obviously, we mentioned some of the wage structure and some big money, maybe some not living up to their full potential.
Yeah, well, in some ways, our top scorer, who's Callum Robinson, has been, he's one of those who can put the ball in the net, but he always annoys me because he's one of those players, and I'm sure every team has had them, just gets caught offside so many times, and sometimes from a free kick, and you think, surely as an experienced player, you look along the line and can see it. But we would be in an even worse position than we are now if it wasn't for Callum Robinson's 12 goals. But I mean, he's been another one that's been blighted by injury. So I'm not sure even whether he's going to be available. I mean, one of Omar Ritz's successes that he brought in is a striker called Yusuf Salek. He's contributed, I think he's up to about 8 goals at the moment. He's young and, still learning his trade, but he's a big guy. He puts himself about. As I said, he's still not the finished article. He scored in our last game against Oxford, but also had a very good chance and failed to control it as well. So I would certainly say he is somebody that is likely to make an impact, and he could be on the score sheet. I mean, I've said this almost every time that you've interviewed me, Adam, is the fact that when you play Norwich, you know that they're going to be good going forward, and they've got some sparkling passing football and can put the ball in the net. But you also know that you've got a very good chance of scoring against them as well. And in fact, I was looking up. Apart from Leeds, Norwich have scored more goals than anybody else in the Championship. Which just fits exactly what I've just said. And yet, if you look at the goals conceded, they're about the 5th worst in the league. So, Yusuf Salek could benefit from that. We've also got, unfortunately, I think like a number of clubs, we've been hit by injuries, but we've got a young guy called Kean Ashford, who has scored a couple of good goals this season. Again, still very young. But he can cause trouble as well. So I think those two, and we've got some decent players in midfield. Again, one of the things we've been hit by is our leadership on the pitch. We started off with Aaron Ramsey as a captain, and then when he got injured, Joe Ralls was one of our longest players. He took over as captain, and he got injured. And then Jack Anick, in the goalkeeper, he took over as captain, and then he got injured earlier this year, and he's out for the rest of the season. So we've now got Callum O'Dowda, our sort of 4th choice, who's in. I think he's only 31, and again, he's a player you might want to look out for. His best. Most people think his best position is left wing back, but he's been playing left back lately. But he does bomb up and down that wing, so he is the source of a number of the good balls into the box that we see. So I would say Yusuf Salek up front, Callum O'Dowda on the left, Kean Ashford also up front, and we haven't got bad players. We've got Alex Robertson, who we got from Manchester City, in midfield. He can always make things happen. Callum Chambers as well, who either plays in defence or just in front of the back four. And we've got Andy Rinomhota, who was voted Players' Player of the Season. He's not a workhorse really, but he puts a lot of effort in, and he's very quick. And so, I mean, I think he would be a good player to have against Norwich, because Norwich are good at breaking and they've got speed. And Andy Rinomhota has got speed and has several times got back and been able to snuff out attacks. So those are some of the names that that come to mind who I would expect to stand out against Norwich. And we have the mercurial Ruben Colwell, who though anyone who saw our cup game against Aston Villa earlier in the season, I mean, he was the man of the match. He was absolutely incredible. He's a sort of tall midfield player, quite young, but can make things happen. And against Aston Villa, he did. But again, he's just so inconsistent, and too many games he's just been either given the ball away or been anonymous. And so if he's a player that can light up a game, but also he can be infuriating.
Indeed, yeah, I think we've got a few of those in our camp. One of the high points maybe of Cardiff season, of course, was the reverse game at the Cardiff City Stadium there in November, October time now. Dramatic comeback from Cardiff, 89th minute goal from Robinson and that late strike from O'Dowda. Where does that maybe rank amongst what's been quite a difficult season for the Bluebirds?
Well, we went through a bit of a phase of scoring late goals, and and that was it's obviously brilliant when you score a late goal like that. And Callum O'Dowda, who I've mentioned, as well as Robinson, he has got a great left-footed shot. So if you give him time and space, I don't want to give the game away, but don't give him time and space on the edge of the box, because that's what he can do. So that was certainly a highlight. And I mean, the way how wacky the Championship can be is we also won away at Watford, and when we won away, it was their first home defeat since March of 2024. And it was obviously their first home defeat of the season. And it was our first away win of the season. So it's just like, that's why I think that the team, it's not a bad team. And you can say this team shouldn't really, with these players, shouldn't be getting relegated, but they are. And part of the problem, I think, is our defence. So when I look back a few years, especially under Neil Warnock, we had these big centre-backs. And in fact, one of our centre-backs at the time, I think it was either Aidan Flint or Sean Morrison, he was our top scorer after about a dozen games one season, because there was all goals from either throw-ins or corners, and big guys heading in the air. And of course, they were also good in the air defensively. But more recent managers have been keener on playing out from the back. And of course, these big guys, that's not their game. And so we brought in other defenders that were supposed to be better at playing the ball out, but they're not as dominant in the air. And so I think we've got the lowest number of goals scored from corners in the Championship. Whereas, if you go back 4 or 5 years, we had one of the highest. So, it's been changes like that that have contributed to it. But Norwich at home was obviously a highlight. Watford away was another highlight. And then in amongst everything, our last victory was away at Blackburn, who were going through a terrible run at the time, but now they seem to have turned that around. But yeah, it's far too few highlights. We beat Swansea 3-0, and that was a major highlight, because in recent seasons we've been on the end of some poor results against Swansea and performances. So those are the three highlights that come to me: Norwich at home, Swansea at home, and Watford away. But yeah, not enough highlights by any stretch of the imagination.
Unfortunately not. Maybe you'll get potentially one on Saturday at Carrow Road. I suppose, how did Cardiff approach this? Do you see Ramsey maybe chucking in a few players that will more likely be here the next season, or do you see some of the younger lads being thrown in? Obviously a bit more of a free hit, so probably a chance to experiment a little bit with the team.
We haven't had the press conference yet. They normally do it on Thursday, or late on Thursday, and now it's come to this situation where we're definitely relegated. What they tend to do is any players we've had on loan, we normally ship them back, because there's no point in paying them while they kind of. So we have a number of good players on loan. We've had a young player from Leicester called Will Alves, who I think has got a great future in the game. He's a winger, and he's got a lot of ability. He's helped us out a great deal. And of course, you always hear managers talk about, oh well, I'm having to manage certain players because they've got niggles or something, so they can't play. And so you wonder, well, are they going to try and play these players, or are they going to try and play fit players? So I think it's a bit of a, it's a bit unknown what sort of team he's going to pick. We have had some younger players. For example, I mentioned the Aston Villa game earlier. We picked two very young fullbacks there, Louis Giles on the left and Dylan Lawler on the right. So, it wouldn't surprise me to see, one or two of those come back in. But it's a bit of an unknown at the moment. I mean, I know you haven't asked me for my prediction yet, but I think we're going to see. Well, before I gave my prediction, I was obviously, everybody saw that you lost 6-3 at home a couple of weeks ago, and then you got a 0-0 draw against Middlesbrough, which I think is, was a very credible result. So I just wondered, was that the Jack Wilshere influence? And have you now become, has he been able to tighten up your defence in one game, or was it a bit of an odd game?
Yeah, I think it was a sort of a mixture of various things. Obviously, you naturally get a little bit of a bounce, I suppose, when you change manager, and clearly tactically he did make a few tweaks that worked in their favour. I also think the players, probably gave a little bit more, that extra sort of 10% more in that game in terms of the defence, and I think they just tried to hit Middlesbrough a little bit more sort of on the transition, which they've got the pace, as you mentioned, some of the players in the attacking areas. So clearly they've got a threat in that department, but defensively, over the course of the season, really, they've been nowhere near good enough. And that's been their downfall. It's why they weren't anywhere near the top 6, I suppose, come the end of the campaign. And this is why this game's become a bit more of a Wilshere versus Ramsey game rather than, Norwich trying to get in the top 6 and Cardiff trying to survive from relegation. And with
So is Jack Wilshere being touted as a possible replacement manager then?
Yeah, I think certainly when he was brought to the football club, Ben Napper, our sporting director, formerly worked with him at Arsenal. So there's obviously that connection. And when he was in, I think the kind of feeling was that he was going to be the natural successor, that if Torp ever departed for pastures new, that Wilshere would be ready and ready to go to kind of step straight in. But it's probably come a little bit quicker than I think most people expected. It probably would have been an expectation maybe a couple of years down the line rather than 10 months in. So it's a risk, but it's one that I suppose if he managed to get a positive result on Saturday, won't do his sort of claims any damage trying to get the job full time. And it's one that I'm quite intrigued to see how it plays out over the summer, whether he does become the sort of leading candidate and the one to take Norwich forward. A big name in the game and clearly done well to sort of work his way up through his coaching journey at Arsenal through the under-18s and brought through a couple of young lads there who are now flourishing in the first team. So he's got a good pedigree, and I don't think a win against Cardiff would do him any harm on Saturday. I suppose how do you sort of see the game unfolding, Simon? It's going to be the Arsenal old boys narrative, Bluebirds versus Canaries.
Yeah.
Free sort of freedom, I suppose, that both teams can play with. Lots of goals usually between us two. So do you see a sort of?
I think I've been thinking about this, and I wasn't sure about what would cause you to get 0-0 against Middlesbrough. So I'd always been having a look at the stats for the rest of the season, and so I think I'd go for a 5-goal thriller, but I'm not sure who's going to get. And I think it's going to be 3-2, but I'm not quite sure who's going to be the 3 and who's going to get the 2. It's almost going to be who's getting the biggest managerial bounce. You were saying there was a better performance for Norwich against Middlesbrough. Cardiff certainly produced better performances in the 2 games under Aaron Ramsey. Oxford was a decent performance as well. And so, hopefully, with both teams getting a lift under the new managers, it is going to be a good game. And, you've got some good players. And as I said earlier, really on paper, our squad is too good to go down, but they are going down. So, I think it could be a great game. As you say, Adam, the shackles off, and both teams, can know that they can go for it, and there's not a lot riding on it apart from for the prospective managers, whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah, certainly open for a goal fest to end the season. That would be nice. Just to wrap up, Simon, I know you do some great work for Cardiff and audio and visual blind people in a
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Just want to quickly talk about that work, and any Cardiff fans that are unaware of your work can find you.
Yes. So it's what we call it is audio description commentary service, and it's provided by a company called Alamar Sports in conjunction with Cardiff City Football Club. And it's a service that means that any fans at the ground can listen to our commentary, in which we focus on where the ball is rather than who's playing it. So that's our primary focus. Of course, we put in other information in, but that's where the focus is. We focus on where the ball is, and we make available. It's the service is provided by basically an audio loop system that goes around the stadium, and then we put a little receiver with headphones in that fans can ask for, and it's available for fans of both clubs as well. So Cardiff City, I know you won't be playing them next season, but in their match day build-up, they give the information about how you can get hold of it, either by emailing the club in advance, or even there's an availability to ring them on the day. So yes, and that service is spreading, and we're hoping the Cardiff City are going to continue with it even in League One next season. So in some ways, League One is going to be some of them have said, well, we've been sleepwalking to it a bit the last few seasons, as you mentioned earlier, Adam, and so it's a chance to do a reset, albeit as far as I remember, Norwich were in the third tier, not that many.
Yeah. 2009, 2010, yeah.
And did they bounce back up straight away?
They did, yeah. They
did, yeah.
They lost 7-1 to Colchester on the opening game of the season, and Brian Gunn, our sort of legendary goalkeeper, got the boot, and then Paul Lambert arrived, and history kind of changed quite dramatically. We got to the Premier League within 2 years, so maybe that's the Cardiff.
Well, I was going to say that there have been lots of success stories, about teams who've been able to do that. But if you look at that division, there are still a number of teams who aren't. We're still down in like Huddersfield and Blackpool and Charlton and Barnsley and Rotherham. So it's not a given, but I think we are. Well, I am quietly confident that we could do it next season.
Yeah, fingers crossed. You do bounce back at the first time of asking. Great work there, Simon. Any Cardiff fans unaware of that, we'll of course link that down below, and you can go and check that out. Great to speak to you again, Simon. Obviously disappointed not to be able to speak to you next season, but wishing all the best for League One, and hoping to see you guys back in the Championship for the season after. Looking forward to the game on Saturday, even without anything riding on it. Hopefully some goals for the fans to look forward to. Jack Wilshere v Aaron Ramsey is definitely going to be the story. So we'll see which one of these Arsenal boys managed to get the best out of the game. So we'll see you on Saturday at Carrow Road.